So I'm at a little bit of a disadvantage because I don't know how much folks already know. So I'm doing a bit of a high-level whistle-stop tour of running through about everything to do with GovUK Notify. Well, a lot of stuff to get through in this session, so it's going to be a fairly quick high-level view. But I'm going to talk a little bit about how Notify came into existence, about how you set up a service on Notify for doing remote sending of SMSs, emails, and letters, a little bit about how access is controlled to it, about the sort of security there, and how they support people. And then, because I know we've got to focus here on printing related things, I'm going to talk a little bit specifically about how it handles remote printing of letters, and then a little bit about how you can integrate with other digital services using APIs, and then talk briefly about a case study, which is when we integrated the Camino product into Notify a little while back. And then we'll talk about performance, so which organizations and how many are using it, and sort of volumes that are happening, how much it costs to use, and then a couple of extra bits at the end about some things that don't exist in Notify yet, but are planned and are going to be coming up in the next few weeks and months. So, brief history about Notify. So, GDS put together a thing called Government as a Platform, which was an idea to have a number of centralized services that anybody in government can use as a way to not have to replicate those things elsewhere. Notify was the one that was put together for, as I say, emails, text messages, and letters. GovUK Pay is a mechanism for doing payments online and covers lots of different ways of doing that. So Notify first came online all the way back in May 2016, and it's had an exponential increase in the number of organizations using it since then. So as you can see, there's at least 2,500 government services currently using Notify, and that's spread all across local and central government. And if you really want to dig into the history, there's a series of podcasts that the Government Digital Service does about a variety of interesting topics. And they did a whole episode on Notify, which you can find linked there. Tells you all about it. So the way Notify works is that you create an organizational account. So you create the Hackney Council account, and then in that you create a number of different services. So they may represent a team in the council, or they may represent a particular digital service that you want to integrate with, for example. So we already have those. So adding a new service is very quick and easy. I'll show you on Notify itself in a second. But the important thing to point out is that services are initially created in what's called trial mode. So at that point, you can do lots of experimenting without worrying that you're accidentally firing off lots of letters all over the place. So let me just quickly hop over to Notify itself. So this is Notify. These are the services that we currently have that are live. We've got some things related to benefits and housing needs, which is the integration with Camino. And we've got some things related to discretionary business grants that have been happening, that's been spun up very recently in relation to the pandemic. So that's something that's enabled us to get off the ground and send lots of messages to people very quickly. And then we've got some stuff related to housing. And I'll talk about this one right at the end. But I just want to demonstrate that it's super quick to add a new service. You just put a name in, parks, and there it is. So then you can start adding. I'll go through templates and other things there, but it's super, super quick to add new things and enable you to get going right away. So let's just get back to here. So I'll talk a little bit about how the different things in terms of how you interact with Notify. It has a a really fine-grained set of security controls to enable what people that are added to the system are not allowed to do. So you might have like an administrator level position for a particular team in the organization that wants to interact with it. And then you can say that certain people can send text messages or certain people can upload letters to be sent out. And then that allows you to partition the capabilities that different people are able to do. It's got really strong digital security. So it has what's called two-factor authentication, which means that when you log in, it sends you a text message. You need to put that in, put the number in that comes through that in order to identify who you are every time. All the information is encrypted, both in transit and at rest. And all data is held for a maximum of 7 days. So in terms of GDPR, when you add information to notify, to customize the texts, emails, or letters that you want to send, that information is not retained for more than 7 days. It's just wiped pretty quickly. So there's much more information about the security of the system if you follow that link. But basically, it's trusted, as I say, by 2,500 organizations, and so there's a lot of people are convinced that it's a good and safe thing to use. In terms of support, Notify provides 24-hour online support because their organization's using it heavily in bulk 24 hours a day. If you have an emergency outside office hours, as it says, they normally get back within 30 minutes or so, but normally the best way that I've found to interact with them is they have a channel on the CrossGov Slack, which is an online chat system, and there's always people in there in working hours. And if you drop them a question or ask them to do something, like, for example, take one of your trial services and make it live, they'll normally get back to you within 5 minutes. So that's the best way to interact with folks during the working day. So there's several ways that Notify can handle the sending of letters. You can either upload an existing letter and just send it out, or you can set up what are called templates in advance and then add information to Notify to customize those templates to send them to individuals. So this is an example of uploading an individual PDF that you'd like to send out. So you would go to the page, you click on choose file, and it would let you upload the thing. And as I say, these are the constraints. So 5 double-sided sheets of paper, because they're sent double-sided, smaller than 2 megabytes in total. And this is the layout specification for letters that are sent out. This is the front page. There's a different one for the remaining pages, but I wanted to highlight this one because it shows you this block here is where the address is, and Notify will automatically check to make sure these are laid out properly, because these are sent out in windowed envelopes, and so it wants to make sure that these fit in the right space properly. If you're uploading a letter and you get a failure, it's almost certainly because the address isn't in the right space to fit. But you can upload things several times before you get the right one, and that doesn't present any problem. The way that I found easiest to interact with this is to create a template document in G Suite, and then just edit your template to make sure your address is in the right place. So that's what you want to do if you just want to upload a one-off PDF. But what Notify really specializes in is these reusable message templates. So the overall layout looks like this. So you can have branding on the top, and then it shows you what the letter itself is going to look like and the different sections that you can edit in order to lay things out properly. But what you can do, this is an email example, but it's exactly the same for letters, is that you can lay it out with a number of these replaceable sections. so that later on, when you supply information to it in bulk, say you want to send things out to 1,000 different residents, you can supply the information that replaces each of these things with the personalization for the right part that you want to update. So these are pretty quick and easy to set up, and then send them out to people in bulk. So I mentioned at the top of here, you can see we've got some Hackney Council branding. So we can ask them to set up the branding related to the guidelines that we want. So we can have images and text and make sure things set up properly. And you just have that conversation via this form. So again, this could be tailored to individual services. So individual teams or digital systems that get integrated with Notify can have their own setups for things if that's something that we need. So once you've got that, you can either manually update a list of things that you want sent out. So this, when it says update list of addresses, it's looking for a CSV, a comma separated values file, which you normally export out of Excel, and that lets you fill in all of these individual bits that you've previously set out for the specific letter that you want to send. And you can do that obviously as many times as you want. But a better way to do that is by integrating with existing services by using.
Sorry, David. Sorry, I'm butting in. I have a question about the CSV files. So I saw that there were like editable bits on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Where you pull in different things. So how would you how would you add kind of that stuff into the CSV file?
So what you've got is you'd have a column for each section. So you'd have a column for each
okay.
And then you'd have a column for the service area manager name,
okay,
type, and these things.
Okay.
So you could, if you were doing it manually, you set that up, and then you just export it as a CSV, and then use this. There you go. Use this upload feature to do it, and then it would fire it off. But while that's a perfectly valid way of doing it, what is an even better way is to integrate it directly with the systems in the council that we use, so that when they generate those large numbers of bulk letters, that they're sent directly to Notify via something called an API, which is essentially a way of plugging different digital systems together. And the GovUK Notify system has a really good extensive set of public APIs that are used by dozens of government organisations, and we'll get a little bit later on about the volume of letters and emails and SMSs that are sent every day. But the APIs is the mechanism for doing that, rather than people creating templates and doing specific individual manual uploads, although that is a perfectly valid way to do it for if you're doing a relatively small number of things you're sending out to people, and you have had an opportunity to do an integration with other systems. But the API work is definitely the recommended way to do things if possible. Briefly, we did this for Camino's system for generating letters for council tax and various other bits and pieces. We ran a 6-week project that I was the delivery manager for, which integrated Camino directly with Notify. So that what happened previously is that when you printed a letter from Camino, it would be put in a specific place that would later be picked up by business support and then printed and posted. But what we set it up instead to do was that there was a program that would automatically look in that place every few minutes and go, are there any more letters that have been added in there? And if they have, we would pick it up, convert it into a PDF, and then send that out to Notify. At the moment, if there's any errors with that, you still need to log on to Notify. I think business support are doing that a couple of times a day for the Camino work just to check to see if any errors have turned up. I know that one of the things that Notify are looking at doing is setting it up so that they automatically contact people if there's any errors generated. But if you're using standard letter templates, which we're certainly doing for Camino, and we've made sure that those templates all work properly for the Notify layouts, or if you're doing the kind of individual PDF uploading we're talking about earlier, again, creating templates in G Suite is a really good way of making sure that the layout fits properly. And naturally, if you're doing things using the templating system built into Notify itself, then that's obviously going to fit. So if you're particularly interested in getting into the details of how Notify works, so how the Camino project worked, we did show and tells all the way through. They're all available on the Hackett YouTube channel. They're probably about 20 minutes each. I would recommend probably having a look at the last one when I go through a lot of how that system worked, both from ways of working, but also from if there's any more technical folks around, or people know technical folks who might be interested in this, we talk about how it's all plumbed together. So in terms of performance, so yeah, Notify sends 95% of emails and text messages within 10 seconds. It prints things at 5:30 p.m. every day, so it prints things and sets them up for postage overnight. And you want things to be so 3 p.m. the next working day if they're added to the service before 5:30. Yeah, there it is. So that's how it works. A tiny little bit of background for this, where Notify came from, was there was a ex-government digital service colleague of mine who more or less single-handedly worked with the DVLA to remove both paper tax discs and Part 2 driving licenses. I don't know if people remember the old big green pieces of paper you used to have in addition to the little plastic cards. And then the DVLA used to print thousands and thousands of both of those things every day. And then when the policy was changed so we didn't need those anymore, they suddenly had a massive amount of printing capacity, and they didn't know what they were going to do with that. And then that was at the same time that GDS was setting up government as a platform, and it worked really well that those two things came together. So this stuff is all printed by the DVLA down in Cardiff, using that capacity, and then that's what's used for the basis of all of this. So those things happening at the same time was just a really good piece of synchronicity. So in terms of performance, the overall Notify performance looks like this. Nearly 1.5 billion notifications sent so far. Similar kind of number of emails, text messages, and we're coming up on 4 million letters, and there's a lot being sent every day. There's an increasing number of people using it all the time. There's an individual dashboard for the services that are connected to it. So if you have a look at discretionary business grants, they set their thing up and then they've not used it. Okay, fair enough. But you can see your individual statistics and the number of successful and fun messages that come through. So that's a little bit about performance. So we'll talk about pricing. So this is essentially run and funded government service run out of GDS in the Cabinet Office. There's no monthly fees or setup fees. There's nothing for procurement. Signing up is very quick. You basically can create a new organisation as long as there's one person who's got an email address that ends in .gov.uk. And you can add as many different services as you want. Emails are free. Text messages, you can send 250,000 without hitting any costs at all. If you're in central government, 25,000 if you're local government. We did this a lot for sending things related to food deliveries when we were sending that service up right at the start of the pandemic. So there's quite a lot of free use for email and SMS. Letters, this is what the costing looks like. So it's $1 piece, 35p second class, 61p first class, all the way up to 5 sheets at 55p and 81p. So most people send things second class, and that's fine. And this gets you double-sided color printing, a C5 envelope with the address window that I mentioned earlier. So things are dropped in. That's why it's important to have the address in the right place. And yeah, most people send things out second class, and that's been fine for people. So there's a lot of work being done by the Notify team in terms of producing the service, making it better. So if you're interested in that, they have a public roadmap, and that shows you the various things that they've been doing recently, and things they plan to be doing in the future are going to get added onto the bottom of here soon. So there's various things that they're doing: multilingual letter templates, several languages, large print letters, all this kind of stuff. But yeah, there's lots of continuous work being done on the service. Probably the most interesting thing that's happening at the moment is a thing that Hackett is doing in conjunction with the Ministry of Justice and Notify on what is being called a virtual printer service. Now, what this means is that when you set up a service on Notify, one of the options would be to create a virtual printer, so that if you're using your PC, you can add another printer, just like as if it was a network printer, and you'd add in the address which would be generated by Notify for that printer. So it would probably be something like servicename.hackney.notify.gov.uk. And then you'd add that in as if you were adding in an ordinary printer that was just connected to your PC. And then you put in a username and password, and then it would turn up as an option on your computer, just as if it looked like a perfectly ordinary printer. But then if you chose to print things to that rather than to a printer on your network, it would automatically send whatever you're printing to Notify. And we've already had a working first prototype for that, and the MOJ is working on a second prototype, and there's lots of conversations happening with Notify about if and when this might be put into production. We're not entirely sure whether the first live iteration of this is going to be hosted by Hackett or by Notify itself, but we're hoping that it's something that will be in place a couple of months from now, somewhere around that kind of time frame. The idea in terms of pricing for this, but pricing will be the same for sending other things by Notify, but in terms of how the costing would be structured is that each of these virtual printers would be tied to a service. So the same way that the service is billed, any use of the virtual printer would get billed in the same kind of way. So Hackney gets billed as an organization, but it sees which service has been doing which printing, and then can do internal cross-charging if they want to balance those costs up for which teams are sending out more letters. So yeah, so this is an exciting thing for a couple of reasons. First of all, because it would allow individual teams in the council who have officers that potentially print and post letters themselves, just to be able to connect to this printer and have it done through Notify, so they don't need to do that effort. But also because it actually makes it considerably easier to integrate to other digital systems. Because previously, when you had to get a developer in to do a bunch of work to write some code to connect up via the APIs, the idea with this is that if you've got a large system that is currently printing things out via the Hackney network printers, you can just point that system to Notify instead, and it will just go off and print things, treating it exactly the same as if it was a network printer. So it's still fairly early days for this. As I say, we've had one prototype that's definitely been shown to work, but in terms of getting something into production that we can start using in a significant way, we're probably 2-ish months down the road from that, but I'll very happily come back and talk more about that when it's up and running. So that's been a very, very quick whistle-stop tour through things to do with Notify. If you have any questions, I'm obviously happy to take things now and be approached afterwards for more information. But really, I would encourage folks to join the cross-government Slack, not just for Notify, but because it's a really excellent place to talk to thousands of people across both central and local government who have lots of really good conversations about all sorts of different topics. And you can obviously reach the Notify team directly there, and they're super responsive. But it's just a really good place to hang out and talk to colleagues from different places about their experience of day-to-day working and share questions and ideas. Got a question from Tony. Says, does Notify address validate, and if so, what does it do with invalid non-deliverable mail pieces? So it does address validate. So we had quite a lot of fun when we were doing the prototype for the virtual printer service, both in terms of trying to lay out the address to make sure it was in exactly the right place so it passed the layout validation, but then also trying to make sure that we were passing it valid addresses so that they would pass that part of the validation as well. So we're operating in trial mode, so we're not actually sending anything. But yeah, we had quite a lot of letters that we were sending to 10 Downing Street and Buckingham Palace and various other places. But you have to get the right things in to make sure that that works. In terms of issues, I'm trying to remember where that is now. Here. Oh, I'm on the spot now. I remember that when we were getting errors, I think if you're using the API, they turn up in here when you're getting issues. And because our prototype was in the wrong service anyway, but because our prototype was a while back, I think our errors have all been removed. In terms of exactly where the errors are when you upload individual letters or when you fire things off using the bulk upload through the templates, can't remember off the top of my head, but I'm 100% sure that they would be accessible. The only issue, as I said before, is that currently if you're doing that kind of, for example, a bulk upload of addresses from a CSV file to use an existing template, you'd have to go into Notify to check which ones, if any, have failed, because those notifications aren't sent out proactively at the moment. But I know that's something that they're looking into. It's definitely something that we're doing in terms of the design for the virtual printer, because what would happen then is that each individual who uses it would, when they connect to the system, would need to have a username and a password, and our intention is that for the username to be your email address. At that point in time, the system knows who you are. So if you send something in that method and there's an error, it would then email you to say there's been a problem. So that's something we're building into the design for that. But in terms of the errors for when you're doing individual PDF uploads or bulk sending, I'm not entirely sure where they're shot, but I know that they are somewhere within Notify and that you need to go in and have a look for yourself. But as I was saying before, in terms of the layout, the best thing to do is just to set up some reusable templates and then edit those, and that really reduces any layout errors. And in terms of address errors, then if they are generated via, oh gosh, what's it called? The local property gazetteer, I think, is the thing that's used by the Maps team in Hackett for looking after all the addresses for properties in the borough. So if the addresses come out of that, then they should be valid anyway. But yeah, it's a very good question. I believe you come into Notify, and there's a section that will actually show you any errors that have turned up. Does anybody else have any questions at this point? No? Cool. All right. Well, thank you much for your time. As I say, it's been a high-speed whistle-stop tour through the service. The folks that are responsible for it are always keen to discuss it with people. As I say, either pop onto the CrossCuff Slack, let me know if you'd like to join that, and I'll very happily sign you up. Or if you don't fancy doing that, then and you do have any questions for the Notify team, just let me know, and I'll pass it on to them and put you in touch with the right people. And I think that probably about wraps it up. But I'm always happy to talk more about this in the future.
Thank you so much for that, David. Really appreciate it.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Are we?
Yeah, I think we're done. We don't have any other questions. Thank you so much.
Cheers. All right. Thank you for your time, everybody.